Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this legal compliance session run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy Law Firm, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session builds upon our previous sessions that we have been running, and they focus on the management of the psychosocial legal requirements and what it actually means for your agency. We will be going back and looking at the key templates that agencies have and what resources you have in order to meet all of these specific legal compliance requirements that your agency does need to follow. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders, past and present, upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar and recorded, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So let's have a look at today's agenda and what we are covering off. Now, we're going to build upon the previous session's information about um, PCBUs. We're going to look at the legal templates and resources that you have, and really look also at what we focus now on is the risk register. And this really builds on from the previous work that we looked at last week. So we're going to also build upon the risk register, and this is really building upon last week's session. So with it, key parts of this is on the legal resources that you do have access to. And I'm going to cover what this actually means for you, what this looks like as well too, and really go over some of these key areas that your agency really needs to focus on. We are going to look at specifically the risk register because this is on the board reporting side of it and what it actually means for your agency. So looking at the resources that I have up here in front of me as well too, you'll see that we've got the consultation and engagement legal memo, we've got the policy, we've got the code of conduct, and we've got the incident reporting side. Now, putting this together from a management point of view and managing all of your compliance obligations is actually incredibly important. It also means that if you're an agency that reports through to, in Victoria, for example, with VIMs and SIMs, for examples, or with your SIRS reporting, then your incident reporting now also covers some of these important requirements around psychosocial obligations that your agency does need to follow. So let's actually just pause here for a minute, and I'll also look at the risk register with you just to go over what this actually looks like for your agency. So you can access Gemba by going to our website, which is kaizensynergy.com. You can see that here. Or alternatively, you can click on the link and you can head simply to gemba360.com. Now, this is the governance, risk, and compliance system. You all should have access to this. If you don't, we'll be sending out the emails again for you as well too. Username and password will take you in to this screen here. Now, a couple of things, and I'll just wait for your screen to catch up as well. But essentially what you have as part of the resources, here we are, is a number of key areas. Now, the first thing I wanted to walk you through was the legal update is posted on the notice board. You'll see legal update, psychosocial laws. If you click on this, it'll take you to this screen here. And what you can actually do is simply click on the link. Here it is here. And it will actually open up specifically for you to be able to view your specific summary of what the legislation actually says that you need to consider. Now, you can see here, I've just paused on your notice board screen here, but essentially you can forward this directly out to your other colleagues and staff members, and also importantly, confirm that they've read it. When you click on the link, what will come up for you is a memo style format which takes apart specifically all of the psychosocial legal requirements that your agency needs to follow. Now, from a management point of view, what you need to ensure is that staff are aware of what their psychosocial compliance obligations actually are. What does the psychosocial hazards actually cover? And you can see we'll actually pulled apart the model rules. We've pulled apart the codes of conduct, what this includes in terms of inspector powers, domestic violence obligations, mental health obligations, PTSD obligations, and all of these items are in fact spelled out. You can see your memo moving now. And this essentially gives you some details of what all of your agency personnel need to know about, along with what are some of the key recommendations that we actually suggest that your agency looks at. Now, this does include things like your general e-learning information for overview of what psychosocial hazards cover, policy templates and risk register, some of which we're going to talk about now. Now, going back, as I mentioned, this is a resource that is able for you to use. You can circulate this out to all personnel and actually start to get their feedback. Now, if I look at the legal templates, the other part that, if I just go back to my slide, the next part of this is about informing personnel and consultation and engagement. And the idea of informing all personnel, here it is here. So we've gone from 2 to 3, informing and getting their engagement, which you can access on the notice board, which summarizes your legal obligations down. The next thing that we need to look at is the policy from a management point of view, and also the code of conduct. Now, again, going back to the Gemba Docs side of it and the Gemba dashboard, and again, these are legal management resources that you can start to use today. So it's not something I'm just showing you that isn't there. It's something that you can actually start to use today. So when I click on Gemba Docs, it brings up this screen here. And of course, I can use the support desk if I've got any questions. I'm just going to close them down for a minute. And so all I'm going to go into is legal templates. And remember, this is resources that you currently have access to. So I click on legal templates, and if I click on psychosocial policy documents, what I now have is 3 documents, and these are built off some of the, well, not some, all of the previous webinars that I've just run before on this topic. The first one is the psychosocial policy. And if I click on that, what will come up is this screen here. Now, the document that you can see in front of you actually specifically covers about psychosocial incident reporting. And this is critically important. I'll show you the code of conduct document that you can use as part of your procedure documents. Now, this is all going to flow into, and I'm moving fairly promptly through this because we have covered these off before. But just to say, you can enable editing on this. It gives you the purpose, the obligations of what your agency's obligations are, as well as the obligations of, and I'm going to say, your agency personnel. I'm just going to highlight this here. So you can actually search and replace this and use this for you within your agency, and also obligations. Now, all of this is actually focused specifically on the incident reporting. And this is really critically important because one of the areas that you do need to consider really carefully in management of the psychosocial hazards is how do you actually manage your incidents within your agency. Now, if I click on the risk management button, and I'm just doing this all live for you to be able to see, here we are here on the back on the Gemba dashboard. If I click on the incident reporting, the risk management section, what does come up is this screen here. And part of this is on your incident reports. Now, if I click on incident reports, what it then brings up is the ability to add a new entry. Now, adding a new entry essentially opens up the ability for me to have all staff actually register any hazards or incidents that they've actually identified. And if I click on add a new entry, you'll see my first name appears. Now, this is some of the standard form incident reporting when I click on add a new entry of the incident reports that we've got. Now, importantly, what we've done here, if I just scroll down through this, is actually bring in the specific areas about, which I'm just going to highlight for us to look at here, is what is required under the model codes of conduct and legislative requirements. So from a management point of view, we're going to look at briefly again the hazards and legal requirements of what you need to consider. But importantly, from a management side of it, and this is where I'm going to say, I'm going to walk you through what the management obligations are for your agency. So if someone has either identified that there is a psychosocial hazard or there is a subject of an incident involving a psychosocial hazard, then what you as managers from your management process needs to look at is, has debriefing been offered? Does this involve a psychosocial risk and a prevention plan, which under the model code of conduct rules, each agency is required to do if there is a psychosocial risk? We identify whether it's been aggression or violence, bullying, or one of these other 5 areas as well too, or it could be a combination. And importantly, from a management point of view, what other structures in place to ensure that this is mitigated? So it might well be that in this case, the requirement is minimize psychosocial hazard. All right. And in this case, I'm going to go, all right, this is the minimum requirement under psychosocial legislation. So I'm going to actually mark this in and actually go, it's under the WHS Code of Conduct Rules and WS legislation. Okay, that's the requirement. The outcome is that I'm going to minimize the psychosocial hazards. Now, how I'm going to do that from a management point of view is I'm going to say, right, we want to actually ensure that staff are retrained, for example, on what psychosocial hazards actually are. So I'm going to put this in, okay, as a live thing for yourselves to look at. And let's just make sure to spell that correctly as well too. Okay, and done. Okay. Now from here, what I'm going to do is select the person that I want to actually do this. In this case, I'm going to mark it as Studio. I'm going to be the quality and risk manager in this case. And because it's important, I want this to be done within the course of this week. So I want this done by this date. And now if I save this, essentially what it'll do is chase Studio down to go, Studio, we need to look at this, getting this done. Studio from here can then go into the Gemba College. And if I bring this up, click on this and go, right, everyone actually needs to do the psychosocial training. If I just click on, here we go here. And now I'm going to click on the Gemba College. And from here, I'm going to go, right, this is actually what we actually need to look at. And we're going to bring this up here. And here it is here. And when I click on this link, what will come up is a list of all of the training for the different personnel that actually need to cover this off as well. And you all have access to this. So I'm not showing you anything that none of you don't already have access to. Now, I will just add one other thing in all of this. In some agencies and some states, they are required to actually report on something called blue forms or something around state-based incident reporting to different government departments. Now, in this case, where this is required, what we have done is actually set up some of these specific incident reporting obligations that agencies do need to look at. So where this comes up, and let me bring this up for you directly on the Gemba dashboard, is essentially the incident reporting form. And if I click on blue form, for example, what you'll find is that there is a specific incident reporting requirement based on different funding requirements that agencies have. And I'm just going to show you one. There are others in different states and other reportings, and for WorkSafe, where you are required to report psychosocial hazards at the end of each 6-monthly reporting period when these come in, then essentially you might have to then look at other additional reports, and we have these in your profile where you need to. And you can actually make these submissions, and I'll just scroll through this directly from here. Now, one of the other things that I touched on was about the policy documents and also things like code of conduct. Now, if I go back to the Gemba docs, here we are here, and I'm going to go into the legal templates. The other documents that you also have access to is what we call the Psychosocial Code of Conduct and the Worker Template Engagement. And we're going to just open the Worker Engagement template for you to look at. Now, this document here, you can see that there are 3 of them. From a management point of view, it's important if we go back to our legal requirements and templates workflow. I'm going to jump back to this again too. And you can see that here we've got the codes of conduct. And essentially what we've taken is the Safe Work National Guidelines and actually added in the specific requirements that your agency needs to look at. And in this case, we've got the Worker Representation Guide and Participation Guide. And we've created this into a procedure for you to use. Now, I stress procedure because what it gives you is all of the things like setting up working groups from a management perspective, electing health and safety representatives, how you actually do that, what the functions and powers are of health and safety reps, what the duties of a person conducting a business as an employer agency is required. What is a health and safety committee? What are the key requirements that your agency needs to look at, as well as how to resolve issues? Now, this document here is a really seminal document for you to be able to use. It spells out, you can see it's a very large document. We've taken it from Safe Work Australia in terms of the works that they've done, and we've actually added some other compliance objectives from a legal point of view that is tailored specifically for not-for-profit agencies. Now, what this means is that as you go through it, and I'm just going to jump back to the risk register here, and you'll see how this all ties together. One of the key requirements that your agency must look at, and I'm not saying that it's an if, this is a must look at, is on the reporting to your directors and officers and managing the risks of psychosocial requirements. Now, that guidelines that I've just shown you sitting here, one of these that we've entered in, and you'll see it on your risk register if you've got this open, is this entry here on the psychosocial hazards. Now, on this, I'm just going to mark this in. Here we are here. And you can see that it's all traffic light coded. And you can see when you open this up, and I can see a few questions have come up. Some of these things is that we have actually updated for some agencies that are running live with the requirements. Now, the current controls of this is to minimize psychosocial hazards within your agency. And part of the risk process is to implement policy and procedures. Now, where this came from is from the Work Health and Safety Model Code of Conduct. And what you actually have in here is, I'll say, a cut and paste of your obligations, 4 of them, in terms of the current controls that you should be having. And I'm just going to highlight these here for you. And also what your agency should be looking at. And there are 4 of them in total. It's ensuring that hazards from a management point of view is that hazards are identified in the workplace and identified hazards are risk assessed as to how likely and how serious they are, that you've got risk controls measures implemented, and periodic reviews of the risk controls are implemented and are appropriate and effective. Now, this is taken directly out of the regulations for your agency. After you do this, and again, someone has just asked, where did this form come from? We've actually adopted the ISO risk register framework. And with working with agencies, what we have looked at is to look at essentially a risk performance based template that your agency can use. So we're looking at, is there a risk treatment plan in place? In this case, we've said no. What's the risk treatment objective? Well, it's to minimize the psychosocial risks. And who is being responsible for this? You can then select who you want and then also have that person report back to yourself on it. You can then review these risks. We've actually put these back to a few dates, and reminders will actually be sent out to you once this is being done. Now, once it's all saved, what you can simply do directly from here is run your risk register and reporting. And any changes that you make can then be essentially clicked on and you can create your own board reports. Now, simply go to board report and click generate document. And what is going to be generated is in fact the live board report about exactly where we're at with these psychosocial hazards. So you can see very quickly, I'm able to run the risk register board reports of exactly where we're up to and give the board a summary of the information that we need to see here directly as well too. And it is literally that quick. Now, from an operationals point of view, what is important is that from this workflow and management side, that essentially you need to consider where you're actually sitting with your management obligations for your agency. It's critically important as part of your templates and research that you actually look at your individual legal workflow for your agency to ensure that it meets its obligations and meets its core legal requirements. The risk management methodology that we're suggesting here for a management side compliance is to look at each of these four areas, and this is where we've built it into your risk register for you. So in terms of what you need to consider is when you're looking at the psychosocial hazards, as we've said, the changes are looking, it is very broad. The psychosocial hazards across the board are defined in the proposed regulations to mean any factor or factors in either work design, systems of work, management of work, carrying out of work as well too, or personal or related interactions that may arise in the working environment and may cause an employee. Important, I stress this, may cause an employee, not just has caused an employee, that may cause an employee to experience one or more negative psychosocial responses that create a risk to their health and safety. So this is why it's actually critically important that you look at the legal templates that we've given you. A number of agencies right around the country have started to implement these over the past few months that we've been running these webinars and actually been able to engage staff very, very quickly and rapidly into looking at how they effectively manage all of these requirements that they need to look at. It's also important, as I mentioned, that in some states like Victoria, that there is additional reporting schemes for employers with more than 50 employees. The proposed regulations actually set out 2 reporting periods, being 1st of Jan to 30th of June and 1st of July to 31st of December of each calendar year. And that's where it's important to be able to report a lot of these psychosocial hazards directly to relevant regulators. And that includes, in this case, for example, WorkSafe Victoria. So when you are looking at these requirements, it is critically important that you consider your obligations. What we are going to be looking at next week is focusing on the governance reporting. I'm going to take it up a level again and looking at the board-specific reporting obligations for your agency in the psychosocial compliance space. And we're going to step through taking the risk register, and also looking at what directors and officers of your companies actually need to sign off on. Now, more than happy to answer any questions that you might have around the management side of the psychosocial hazards. If you are watching this recording after today's live session and have any questions, then by all means, please reach out to us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at support@gemba360.com. I will also add that you can also, if you are directly on the Gemba chat group, I do suggest that you use the chat. You can see that here, that we have that open here. It is in the bottom left-hand corner, and it is there for you to use, and it allows us to very quickly respond to you very quickly and promptly as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We